TechDrop, how a jet engine actually works. You've flown on one. You've probably never had it explained properly. This is the real mechanism. The actual physics happening a few feet from your seat at 35,000 feet, explained clearly, start to finish. A modern jet engine is technically called a turbofan, and the name tells you the two main components, a turbine and a fan. Air enters through the front. The large fan you see when you look into the engine pulls air in, and most of that air, roughly 80 to 90% in a modern high-bypass engine, doesn't even go through the engine core. It flows around the outside. This is called bypass air, and it's actually what generates most of the thrust, not the fire, the fan. The remaining 10 to 20% of air goes into the engine core, where the real transformation happens. It first passes through the compressor, a series of spinning blade stages that squeeze the air into a smaller and smaller space. By the time it reaches the back of the compressor, the air pressure has increased by a factor of 40, 50, sometimes 60 to 1. Compressing air heats it. By the end of the compression stage, that air is already several hundred degrees hot, purely from being squeezed. That compressed, heated air enters the combustor. Fuel is injected and ignited continuously, not in individual explosions like a car engine, but a continuous, controlled flame. Temperatures in the combustor spike to around 2000 degrees Celsius. That's hotter than the melting point of the metal alloys the engine is built from. The only reason the engine survives is a combination of ceramic thermal coatings and internal air channels that actively cool the metal components from the inside, while they're surrounded by that heat. This superheated, high-pressure gas then blasts through the turbine section. And here's the elegant part of the design. The turbine is mechanically connected by a shaft to the compressor and the fan at the front. The expanding hot gas spins the turbine blades, and that spinning motion is transmitted forward through the shaft to drive the compressor and the fan. The engine powers itself. Once it's running, the exhaust gas driving the turbine is what keeps the compressor compressing and the fan spinning. It's a closed energy loop. After passing through the turbine, the remaining hot gas exits through the back of the engine core and mixes with that bypass air that skipped the core entirely. That combined exhaust is what you see and hear coming out the back. But by this point, most of the actual thrust has already been generated by the fan pushing that bypass air backward. The hot exhaust contributes some thrust too, but in a modern high-bypass engine, the fan is doing the majority of the work. The materials engineering is where this gets genuinely absurd. Turbine blades in the hottest section of the engine are grown as single crystals of nickel superalloy, meaning the entire blade is one continuous crystal structure with no grain boundaries, because grain boundaries are where metal fatigue cracks start. Each blade has microscopic cooling channels drilled through it, pumping air through the inside so a film of cooler air protects the outer surface from gas that is literally hotter than the metal's melting point. Modern engines run this cycle continuously for tens of thousands of hours between major overhauls. A commercial engine might run for 20,000 flight hours, over 2 years of continuous operation if you added up the running time, before it needs a full tear-down inspection. Every rotating part is spinning at speeds that would tear a lesser design apart. Fan blade tips on large engines can approach or exceed the speed of sound, even while the engine itself sits at a relatively modest RPM, purely because of how far those blade tips are from the center. The fan blades themselves are an engineering marvel most people never think about. On the largest commercial engines, fan blades are made from carbon fiber composite rather than metal, lighter, stronger, and able to be shaped with complex 3D curves that pure metal manufacturing couldn't achieve. If a fan blade breaks off in flight, a bird strike, for example, the entire fan case is engineered to contain that debris. It has to. A piece of composite blade traveling at those speeds would go through anything else in its path. So next time you're on a plane and you hear that engine spin up before takeoff, that's 4 distinct machines working in perfect sequence. Fan pulling air in, compressor squeezing it to 50 times atmospheric pressure, combustor igniting it at 2000 degrees, turbine extracting the energy to keep the whole cycle running. All of it happening continuously, thousands of times a second for years without stopping. That's the machine that gets you across an ocean. Follow TechDrop for how things actually work. Link in bio.